Promises strong as a spell, I'll never tell.
Hi guys, welcome back to exmolex. A few weeks ago in this video, I briefly mentioned that the Mormon Church used to be very against birth control. And I said that maybe I would do a video on it at some point, and several people were like, yes, do it. So that's what we're gonna do today. Now, having grown up in the Mormon Church, I knew that the church had at some point advocated against birth control in some form or another, because they are very much a have a lot of children religion. They believe that the commandment to multiply and replenish the earth is still in effect. And so I had heard a lot that like we are expected to have children. That's part of Mormonism. That's part of being here on earth. And I had heard something or another about the fact that the church used to discourage people from using birth control. Now, I'm 30 years old, so I heard about this in like the 90s and early 2000s, and I didn't know a ton about it or who had originally said it or when it was said. And so going back and like actually doing the research on this was very enlightening. So if you were part of the Mormon Church, or especially right now, if you are a part of the Mormon Church and you don't think that the church was ever against birth control, buckle up. I have some very interesting things for you to hear. First, let's look at what the church has on its website today, right now, about birth control. Under topics and questions, this is what it says. Decisions about birth control and the consequences of these decisions rest solely with each married couple. Elective abortion as a method of birth control, however, is contrary to the commandments of God. Not surprising, the church is very pro-life, anti-abortion. And if you were to like search Google for LDS Church birth control, that's the first thing that would come up. The first thing you would see on the church's website for like questions that maybe converts have or average people have about the Mormon Church under topics and questions, that's what you would probably see. But what you will also find still currently on the church's website is this. In the Eternal Marriage Student Manual, which you can see is on the church's website, there is a section called birth control. And if you scroll through this, what you'll notice is that it's mostly quotes from different talks, prophets and apostles, different church leaders, all about mostly how it's important to have children, not so much discussing birth control. So I want to read some of these quotes for you, and you tell me what you think the gist of this is. The first commandment that God gave to Adam and Eve pertained to their potential for parenthood as husband and wife. We declare that God's commandment for his children to multiply and replenish the earth remains in force. The family, a proclamation to the world. Now this next one, I can't handle the wording of it. You'll see what I mean. See, it was written in the 40s, so I'll give a little bit of leeway with that, like, they spoke differently back then, but the way this is worded just makes me, it makes my skin crawl. This is the first presidency, Heber J. Grant, J. Reuben Clark Jr., and David O. McKay. In a conference report. The Lord has told us that it is the duty of every husband and wife to obey the command given to Adam to multiply and replenish the earth, so that the legions of choice spirits waiting for their tabernacles of flesh may come here and move forward under God's great design to become perfect souls. For without these fleshly tabernacles, they cannot progress to their God-planned destiny. Thus, every husband and wife should become a father and a mother in Israel to children born under the holy eternal covenant. Fleshly tabernacles? Could you not just say physical body? Oh my God. It sounds like a death metal band name. Anyway, President Joseph F. Smith, motherhood lies at the foundation of happiness in the home and of prosperity in the nation. God has laid upon men and women very sacred obligations with respect to motherhood, and they are obligations that cannot be disregarded without invoking divine displeasure. In 1 Timothy 2:13-15, we are told that Adam was first formed, then Eve. Can she be saved without childbearing? She indeed takes an awful risk if she willfully disregards what is a pronounced requirement of God. Again, keep in mind that this is currently on the church's website under birth control. Is it just me, or so far does it sound like it's pretty serious that you are supposed to have children? Let's keep going, because there's more. Love realizes his sweet happiness and his most divine consummation in the home, where the coming of children is not restricted, where they are made most welcome, and where the duties of parenthood are accepted as a co-partnership with the eternal creator. David O. McKay. We are under divine commandment to multiply and replenish the earth and to bring up our children and grandchildren in light and truth. Howard W. Hunter. The greatest mission of woman is to give life, earth life, through honorable marriage to the waiting spirits, our Father's spirit children, who anxiously desire to come dwell here in this mortal state. Melvin J. Ballard. This commandment was the first in sequence and first in importance. It was essential that God's spirit children have mortal birth and an opportunity to progress toward eternal life. Consequently, all things related to procreation are prime targets for the adversary's efforts to thwart the plan of God. Dallin H. Oakes. So the thing that's interesting to me about all of this, they have the one section, the like kind of Q&A topics sort of thing, where they talk about how birth control is between the couple and God, and like we're not getting in the middle of that in any way whatsoever. But on the flip side, this information, these quotes, are also under a topic of birth control on the church's website that's meant more for current members of the church. And they don't say like you're not allowed to use birth control, or that it's a sin to use birth control, or that you should have 14 children. But they kind of do say that though. They kind of do say like, you need to have children. It is a commandment to have children. This is like something that is not optional. And they make it sound like it's bad to not have very many children. One of the reasons I think this is interesting is because many Mormons in today's culture, if you mention that it's important in the Mormon church to have children, and that this can make people who cannot have children, who are infertile or who suffer from infertility issues, it can make them feel bad about themselves. They'll be like, well, no, like we don't teach that. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, you can choose to have children. That's not part of our doctrine, you know, blah, blah, blah. But like, it kind of seems like it is. And again, currently on the church's website. Now, under that same heading, birth control in the Eternal Marriage Student Manual, there is also this one quote by Gordon B. Hinckley that I feel like feels different than the other ones. Listen to this. The Lord has told us to multiply and replenish the earth that we might have joy in our posterity, and there is no greater joy than the joy that comes of happy children and good families. But he did not designate the number, nor has the church. That is a sacred matter left to the couple and the Lord. Gordon B. Hinckley. That specific quote feels different to me than the other ones. It feels more like the first thing we read, like it's between the husband and wife and God. Like, we are not getting in the middle of that. You can choose to have however many children you want, blah, blah, blah. That's one quote versus I don't know how many other ones, like 10. There's more of an emphasis on like, you should have children. It is important to have children. It's a commandment to have children. You need to have children. And then there's this one quote that's like, but like, it's up to you. But what did the church teach in the past? You're going to be very surprised by this, because I, as somebody who grew up in the church and was aware that the church used to be against birth control, I was very surprised just how serious this is in the eyes of church leaders. So from 1915 to 1970, there was an official church publication called the Relief Society magazine. The church has had many official magazines over the years, like the Ensign, the New Era, the Improvement Era. This was another one of those. In 1916, this official church magazine released a very interesting article about birth control. They asked a bunch of very prominent church leaders, like apostles, what their opinion was about birth control, and then they just printed whatever they said. So let's read some of these quotes, shall we? In my opinion, the practice of restricting the number of children in the family, as advocated by many people, is sinful. It is contrary to the first great commandment given to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, when the Lord said to them, "Be fruitful, multiply, and replenish the earth." Restricting the family to 1 or 2 children, as is often done in the world at large, more especially among the rich who have ample means to support large families, is a serious evil, even to them. Elder Rudger Clausen, Quorum of the 12 Apostles. The efforts on the part of the Eastern Magazine writers to educate the people of the United States, particularly parents, to the doctrine that they should limit the number of their offspring to 3 or 4 children, and how this can be accomplished, is both pernicious and an abomination in the sight of the Lord, and it robs man and his Maker of their glory and increase. My wife has borne to me 15 children. Anything short of this would have been less than her duty and privilege. George F. Richards, Quorum of the 12 Apostles. So far, these two men in the Quorum of the 12 Apostles have called birth control and limiting the number of children you have a serious evil and an abomination. Let's keep going. Any effort or desire on the part of a married couple to shirk the responsibility of parenthood reflects a condition of mind antagonistic to the best interests of the home, the state, and the nation. Prophet David O. McKay. The only legitimate birth control is that which springs naturally from the observance of divine laws and the use of procreative powers, not for pleasure primarily, but for race perpetuation and improvement. Excuse me? During certain periods, those of gestation and lactation, the wife and mother should be comparatively free to give her strength to her offspring, and if this involves some self-denial on the part of the husband and father, so much the better for all concerned. O.F. Whitney, Quorum of the 12 Apostles. In answer to your communication in which you ask me for my views on the question of birth control, or the limiting of the number of children in a family to 1 or 2, according to the teaching of the day by the so-called elite or fashionable class, I have this to say. The first great commandment given to both man and beast by the Creator was to be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth, and I have not learned that this commandment was ever repealed. Those who attempt to pervert the ways of the Lord and to prevent their offspring from coming into the world in obedience to this great command are guilty of one of the most heinous crimes in the category. There is no promise of eternal salvation and exaltation for such as they, for by their acts they prove their unworthiness for exaltation and unfitness for a kingdom where the crowning glory is the continuation of the family union and eternal increase, which have been promised by all those who obey the law of the Lord. It is just as much murder to destroy life before as it is after birth. Although man-made laws may not consider it, but there is one who does take notice, and his justice and judgment is sure. Prophet Joseph F. Smith. Oh my God. I was so surprised by this one in particular. I mean, I shouldn't have been. It's Joseph F. Smith, and this guy, we've talked a lot about Joseph F. Smith on this channel. I shouldn't be surprised anymore by the things that came out of this man's mouth, but oh my God. So those who attempt to use birth control or not have as many children as possible are attempting to pervert the ways of the Lord. They are guilty of one of the most heinous crimes. There is no promise of eternal salvation and exaltation for such as they. They are proving their unworthiness for exaltation and unfitness for the kingdom. And it is murder. It is just as much murder to prevent yourself from having children. That is wild to me. Isn't it wild to you? Please leave a comment. Let me know that I'm not alone in being shocked by that. Because again, like I said, I knew that this was like a teaching of the past, but I didn't realize just how serious church leaders were about it. And again, this is not like something that these guys just said offhandedly, or it was like part of their own personal opinion. This was something that, as leadership of the church, they published in a church magazine, an official church magazine, to share with the members and let everybody know, this is serious, this is how we feel, you can't be going and using birth control, otherwise you're evil and you're not gonna get to heaven. Now we're not done, there's still a couple more that I wanna share with you. This is another one from Joseph F. Smith because he can't not. This is in the Doctrines of Salvation. Birth control is wickedness. The abuse of this holy covenant to be fruitful and multiply has been the primary cause for the downfall of nations. When a man and a woman are married and they agree or covenant to limit their offspring to 2 or 3 and practice devices to accomplish this purpose, they are guilty of iniquity which eventually must be punished. Unfortunately, this evil doctrine is being taught as a virtue by many people who consider themselves cultured and highly educated. It has even crept in among members of the church and has been advocated in some of the classes within the church. It should be understood, definitely, that this kind of doctrine is not only not advocated by the authorities of the church, but also is condemned by them as wickedness in the sight of the Lord. Possibly no greater sin could be committed by the people who have embraced this gospel than to prevent or destroy life in the manner indicated. Birth control leads to damnation. Like double down, double down, double down. Last one, Bruce R. McConkie, another just delightful man. His book, Mormon Doctrine. It follows that those who practice birth control, the regulation of the number of births in a family by the employment of artificial means or contraceptives to prevent conception, are running counter to the foreordained plan of the Almighty. They are in rebellion against God and are guilty of gross wickedness. That was in the 50s. So the church, for quite a long period of time, at least that we know of, decades long, decades of telling membership directly from the highest leadership in the church, the prophet and the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. They were telling the members, birth control by any means is wicked and evil and it can keep you out of heaven. Not only that, but deciding by whatever means to try not to have a lot of kids, to try to have, between like 2 and 4 kids, is terrible, is wicked, is evil, can keep you out of heaven. And again, not even just that, but by more modern church standards that are currently on the church's website, it is a commandment to multiply and replenish the earth. And this is something that everybody should do. Is having children a requirement in the Mormon church? Technically, no, but will you feel bad about yourself if you don't? Probably. There is so much material, not only in the past, not only in this old church magazine, but also currently on the church's website that is like, you need to have children. It is so important to have children. It is a commandment to have children. If you don't have children, you are not fulfilling God's commandment to multiply and replenish the earth. It's seen as very, very, very important. So I'm interested to hear from anybody, really. But like, if a Mormon decides to watch this video all the way through, I am so curious where your mind is on this, especially after hearing all those old quotes, all the way up until at least almost the 60s. At what point did it stop being wicked, an abomination, a great evil to use birth control? Like, where was the cutoff point? When did God decide actually it's fine? Because from my research and what it looks like is that just very recently in 2023, this year, the church finally started covering birth control on its insurance that it has for its employees. This year, it's fine to use birth control now. In fact, we'll pay for it. I just am very curious, like at what point did we, like, where was the switch? Did God change his mind? Why did God change his mind? At what point was he like, you know, it all, for however long, for decades and decades, it is evil to try to not have kids. It's evil to stop having kids. It's evil to use birth control to prevent kids. It's murder. And again, remember, the prophet speaks for God. He's the only man on earth that speaks for God. He is God's mouthpiece upon the earth. So when he's spewing all of this information out in official church publications, that is meant as prophetic advice for the people that God, through the prophet, is telling them. So God was telling everybody through the prophet that birth control is evil, wicked, abomination, will keep you out of heaven. And now, in 2023, the church will pay for it for its employees. So birth control is fine now. When did that change? Is there any Mormon who watches this, can absorb this information in its totality and not have to do mental gymnastics to justify this huge change? I'm very curious. I want to hear about it. If you used to be Mormon, were you aware that the church was this intense about being against birth control? This intense about you must have children and you need to have a lot of them, and if you try not to, you aren't going to heaven. Wow. Please share this. Share this far and wide. I want everybody to hear what the church has had to say, because again, this is like, I had to go digging for this. This is in like an old archive of the Relief Society magazine that I had to go looking for and find these things. So I want to hear what you guys think, and I want more people to be aware of this, because this is just another thing that, like, if I'd heard this as a Mormon, I would have been like, item to add to the shelf, because that is a huge change. God's prophet advocating for one thing, and then less than 100 years later being like, just kidding, it's not a big deal, you can totally do it, it's fine, we'll pay for it. Anyway, really curious to hear your thoughts. Cannot wait to read the comments. And remember that, like, even just liking this video and commenting on it helps boost it in the algorithm. So if you can't share for whatever reason, leave a like and a comment and watch the video all the way through to the end, because that helps the video be seen by more people. Huge thank you to my patrons for supporting the channel. I appreciate you guys so much. And extra special thank you to Amy, Craig Call, Doug Davis, and Tans for supporting at the Demon tier on my Patreon. You guys make this all possible. If you would like to support the channel, I would greatly appreciate that. There are links to do so in the description below, and there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can help support. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to leave a comment and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!
Revealing no secrets you're keeping, these promises strong as a spell. I'll never tell. Yeah, I like you.